And now to the very curious case of Sweden. The Nordic nation has not subscribed to most of the lockdown measures that the rest of the Western world, indeed much of the world, has adhered to. If you're hungry, you can go to a restaurant in Sweden. Thirsty, the bars are open as well. You need a haircut? Not a problem. Just go to the next barbershop or salon. As for kids, the young ones at least are still in school. The result, the death rate in Sweden is higher than in neighboring countries, but not as high as Spain and Italy, for instance. Parts of the scientific community in Sweden have been up in arms, but the man who came up with Sweden's approach is a scientist as well. That man is Anders Tegnell. He is Sweden's chief epidemiologist, and he joins me now. Dr. Tegnell, pleasure to have you on. Let me ask you to begin. Thank you. Let me ask you to begin by explaining very simply, why did you decide, in contravention of almost every other major country, that you did not need to do a lockdown in Sweden?
I think because we really, from the very early on, thought we could achieve the same kind of effect using the normal Swedish system for public health and work a lot with voluntary measures, working a lot with giving a lot of responsibilities to the individuals in our country.
And does that mean you think that you can achieve a large part of what you need to do? That, in other words, you can flatten the curve enough by just putting out some guidelines, and you don't have to shut schools, you don't have to shut restaurants, etc. In other words, you get enough bang for the buck, as it were?
Yeah, I think so. And I think so far, 6-7 weeks into the epidemic in Sweden, we have managed to do that. We have a very flat curve. Our health system is still working. It's a tough time for them, but they have never been overburdened. Actually, and at any given time, there's been at least 20% of the ICU beds have been empty. Travel in Sweden has been cut down by at least 90%. A lot of people are staying home. Our yearly flu epidemic usually lasts for like 6-8 weeks. Suddenly stopped after 4 weeks when we instituted these measures. So I think we get a lot of effect from the things we do.
Can you explain the death rate? Because you have in Sweden a death rate that is a good bit higher than in your neighboring countries, though, as we pointed out, not compared to the worst countries in Europe. But why do you think, is this an unintended or accidental occurrence, or is it a cost you had to pay?
I think it's definitely an unintended occurrence. It's not something we counted on, not something we wanted. And there is two different, I think, reasons for this. One is that actually our incidence in Sweden has been much higher than in our neighboring countries. I think we are quite sure about that because our testing capacity has been limited. And I think the number of people in Sweden that has been infected so far has been quite a lot greater than in our neighboring countries. That's one part of the answer. The other part is that we had an unfortunate number of introductions of the disease into our elderly homes in Sweden. And that has really caused a very high level of mortality in those places. And that's been very unfortunate. But a large part of our mortality has taken place in those institutions.
So do you think that means we should be approaching this disease slightly differently, particularly as we move into opening up in the rest of the world, which is there should be greater emphasis in terms of guidelines and quarantine measures for old people? Because in much of the Western world, at least, 80 to 90% of the hospitalizations seem to be for people who are over 60 or 65. So rather than quarantining everybody, in a sense, is there a way to be a little bit more firm in the quarantine measures for those people who are really at risk?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we're all learning as we're going with the disease. It keeps on surprising us in different ways. But I also think you really need to adapt your measures to the way your country works. And I think that's what we have done in Sweden. We use the tools we normally use in public health. And I think that's the reason why it works so reasonably well so far.
What is your reaction to the American strategy of handling the coronavirus?
I think from my point of view, I don't know the details. You had an unfortunate start. I think you can tell that from countries who had an unfortunate start, like Italy and a few others. then you very quickly get into major problems. When you've been able to sort of keep it reasonably low for some time and can adapt and get your hospital system to scale up, get your testing system to scale up and so on, it's a lot easier to handle it, even if also then you will have high mortality and a lot of cases and a strain on your health system. But if you miss it in the very beginning, then this disease can really cause havoc.
Do you think that having a highly decentralized healthcare system the way the United States does makes it harder? I notice when looking at your system, you're able to make very quick and efficient decisions from the center.
Yeah, but that's only partly so. I mean, even in Sweden, being small, we also have a highly decentralized system. But there is also possibility, and there is a lot of experience on working together when we have to. So even if it's highly decentralized, all the decisions are taken out in the regions. There's 20 regions in Sweden. Still, when we have this kind of crisis, we all come together and work together. So it looks like we're having a lot of critical decisions taken at national level, but actually all of them need to be repeated at local level.
Would it be fair to say that your basic strategy was to try to find some way to deal with the coronavirus where you allowed the maximum amount of economic activity while still getting the curve down so that it was sort of sustainable?
No, economic activity has never played into our decisions. I mean, it has, of course, played into the government's decision, and it is the government in the end that takes the decision. But our advice to the government has been really completely focused on public health. But sustainability is an important part of it. So we all knew from the beginning that this was going to be a long haul. We're going to have to live with this virus, with this disease for a long time. So we need to find solutions that we can keep on doing for a long time. And we all know that we can't close schools for months. We can't close borders for months and these kind of things. So we try to start working with the things that we believe are sustainable for a long time. And then maybe add a few things if it gets out of hand, that we can have for a shorter time, but to really start with the things that we can keep on doing.
Dr. Tegnell, pleasure to have you on, sir.
Thank you.